The sun bled red over the desert horizon, spilling its last light across the dry plains of Arizona territory. The land was silent except for the whisper of the wind and the low murmur of the river that snaked through the canyon, the River of Vengeance, as the locals called it. No one knew who first gave it that name, but everyone knew why. That river had seen more blood than rain. For years, outlaws ruled these lands. Ranchers were robbed, towns burned, and families shattered. Among those victims was Ethan Cole, a quiet ranch hand turned gunslinger by tragedy. Once, he had been a man of peace, soft-spoken, kind, and content to raise horses on his father's land. But that was before the McBrow gang rode through Dry Creek and took everything from him. They came one night in a storm, led by Silas McBrow, a man whose cruelty had no measure. They wanted the Cole ranch to the ground, killed Ethan's father in front of him, and left his younger brother hanging from the barn rafters. Ethan survived only because he had been out in the hills fetching horses. When he returned and saw what was left, something inside him died, and something else was born. Dion, the making of a gunslinger. Ethan buried his family by the river, marked the graves with rough stones, and swore an oath to the heavens that they would not rest until every man in the McBrow gang had met justice, one bullet at a time. He left Dry Creek that same night and wandered for years, learning the art of survival and the craft of the gun. He rode with bounty hunters, learned trekking from Apache scouts, and studied the way a man's hands twitched before he drew. He became a ghost story, the rider from nowhere, some called him. His face was seldom seen, but his legend spread like wildfire across the frontier. Yet vengeance as a cost, and as the years passed, Ethan's heart grew as dry as the dust he rode through. Each life he took brought him no peace, only more emptiness. Still, the fire in him would not die. The name Silas McBrow echoed in his dreams like thunder. Dion, returned to Dry Creek. 10 years later, Ethan rode back into Dry Creek, or what was left of it. The town was barely standing. The saloon doors hung loose, the church bell was cracked, and the streets were lined with dust instead of people. The McBrow gang had taken over everything, the mines, the land, even the sheriff's badge. Silas McBrow ruled the town from his mansion by the river. As Ethan dismounted, he felt the eyes of the townsfolk on him. Some whispered, some looked away, but a few recognized him. The black hat, the scar across his cheek, the cold steel eyes, they had seen him in wanted posters and ghost stories alike. In the saloon, he ordered a whiskey. The bartender, a weary man named Head, started for a moment before speaking softly. "You came back," Head said. Ethan nodded. "He came for what's mine." Head's eyes flickered nervously to the door. "Silas runs this town now. He's got men everywhere. If you're smart, you'll ride on." Ethan downed his drink and set the glass down slow. "He ain't smart," he said. "I'm determined." Dion. The river's edge. That night, Ethan made camp by the river, the same river where he buried his family. The moonlight shimmered on the water like silver tears. He remembered his father's words. "A man's worth ain't measured by how he dies, son, it's how he lives after life tries to kill him." Ethan's jaw tightened. He hadn't come just for revenge anymore. He came to end the sickness that poisoned this land. If vengeance was the fire that brought him here, justice would be the water that cleansed it. Dion. A town awakens. Word spread fast the next morning. The rider from nowhere had returned. The people of Dry Creek, long beaten and broken, began to stir. Some whispered hope again. A few even dusted off their gold rifles. The blacksmith, an old friend of Ethan's father, offered him a freshly forged colt. "For your pa," the man said quietly. Ethan nodded, holstering the weapon. "For all of us." When Silas McBrow heard the rumors, he laughed. "Ethan Cole's dead," he told his men. "But if he ain't, I see him buried proper this time." Dion. The reckoning begins. Ethan struck first. At dawn, he found 2 of McBrow's riders harassing a widow near the general store. When the dust settled, both men were dead. One shot clean through the heart, the other left alive with a message carved into the dirt beside him. There's still a sign coming. By sundown, the whole town knew Ethan Cole was back for blood. McGraw's men started patrolling the streets, but fear had already crept into their bones. Ethan was a shadow, striking from alleys, rooftops, and the riverbank. Each time he appeared, another outlaw fell. The people began to stand a little straighter. They started to believe again. Dion, the sheriff's choice, among those who noticed was Sheriff Tom Briggs, a man once honest, now broken under McGraw's thumb. I found Ethan one night in the old church. You're stirring up trouble, the sheriff said, his voice heavy. These folks can't afford hope. It gets them killed. Ethan looked up from the pew. They're already dead inside, Tom. I'm just showing them how to live again. Briggs sighed. You can fight the whole gang alone. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Watch me. That night, the sheriff made his choice. When McGraw ordered him to bring Ethan in, he refused. It was the first brave thing he'd done in years, and the last. They found him hanging from the same gallows where Ethan's brother had once swung. Dion, the final duel. The next morning, Ethan rode to McGraw's mansion by the river. He came alone, dressed in black, his paws silent against the sun. The gang waited for him, a dozen men with rifles aimed and hatred burning. Ethan didn't flinch. Silas, he shouted, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. You took my blood, now I've come for yours. McGraw stepped out onto the porch, smelling like a wolf. Well, I'll be damned. The prodigal son returns. He twirled his revolver lazily. You think killing me'll bring them back, boy? Ethan's hand overhead near his bone. No, he said softly. But it'll stop you from killing anyone else. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Then, steel flashed, thunder cracked, and smoke filled the air. When it cleared, Silas McGraw lay bleeding by the riverbank, the bone knocked from his hand. Ethan stood over him, his chest rising slow and steady. McGraw laughed weakly. You ain't no better than me. Ethan looked down, eyes cold. No, I'm worse, I survived you. He stared at his bone and turned away. He'd come to kill a monster, but they found something greater, peace. He let McGraw's body drift into the river, the current carrying it away like a dark memory dissolving into light. Dion, redemption by the river. Days later, the townsfolk gathered by the water. The McGraw gang was no more. The town was free. Ethan stood apart, hat in hand, staring at the river that had once run red with vengeance. Had the bartender approached him. What'll you do now? He asked. Ethan smiled faintly. Maybe start leaving. My pa used to say a man can't change the past, but they can sure stop it from ruining his future. He mounted his horse, looked one last time at Dry Creek, and rode toward the rising sun. Behind him, the river shimmered, calm for the first time in years. Some said they went south to Mexico. Others claimed they joined the Rangers. But those who really knew him believed something else. He became a guardian, a wandering soul who rode from town to town, fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. And wherever injustice rose again, folks would whisper in awe and gratitude. The rider from nowhere has returned. Dion. Moral of the story. River of Vengeance is more than a western tale of revenge, it's a story about transformation. Ethan Cole's journey shows that vengeance may fuel a man's steps, but it's justice and forgiveness that finally give him peace. The true measure of strength isn't how many battles you win, but how many times you rise after life breaks you and choose to keep riding forward.